I have a weird relationship with Halloween. I love costumes, Halloween decorations, and I have a very strong sweet tooth. But I get nightmares incredibly easy. Just ask my parents, who had to calm me down after I got a nightmare from watching a commercial for a Goosebumps TV episode. So while I love to get into the Halloween spirit and bring that fun spirit into our house, I also don't want to bring on the nightmares for myself or my kids, which is why I've put together a list of podcasts and podcast episodes for you to listen to as a family. I'm Andy Smiley, the Friendly Podcast Guide. I'm a mom who has used podcasts to fight the boredom and loneliness of motherhood, and now I want to help you find a podcast that can do the same thing for you. It can be overwhelming to try and find a podcast you'll enjoy in the thousands of shows that are out there. That's where I come in. My episodes are short and they answer all of the questions you'll have about the podcast, so you'll know if it's a good fit for you or not. I'm here to help you find a podcast you'll love without wasting your time. Now, let's talk podcasts. This first Halloween Kid podcast recommendation is an episode from the kid podcast, Little Stories for Tiny People. It's a podcast full of gentle, sweet stories that are a great introduction to kid podcasts for your youngest listeners. The episode that will be great for this Halloween season is called Little Rabbit's Halloween. This non-scary story centers on Little Rabbit, whose friends can't figure out what his costume is. This episode is sweet and not scary at all, and will be a great way to bring the candy and costumes side of the Halloween spirit into this season. The episode is about 15 minutes long and great for kids ages 2 to 5 or 6. The next Halloween Kid podcast is called Grim, Grimmer, Grimmest. It's a fairy tale podcast for kids ages 7 and older that is made in partnership with Adam Gidwitz. Each episode features a classic fairy tale full of curious creatures and mischievous foes. These tales are retold to a group of inquisitive kids who anticipate plot twists, crack jokes, and share their own perspectives on these very grim tales. One of my favorite parts of this podcast is that each episode is rated as grim, not too scary, grimmer, kind of scary, or grimmest. Yep, it's scary. So you know what you're getting into and can plan accordingly. Each episode is about 25 minutes long. You can listen to all of the Grim, Grimmer, Grimmest episodes on Pinna, which is an on-demand audio streaming service specifically made for kids, or you can listen to about 50 of the episodes on the podcast app of your choice. One episode that is available on all podcast apps is called The Goose Girl. It's about a princess and her cousin who set off on a journey to a faraway kingdom, but something unexpected happens along the way. This episode is categorized as grimmer, so kind of scary, so you can decide if it's a good fit for your family or not. Before we talk about more Halloween Kid podcasts, let's take a quick break to talk about my podcast consultations. I've been able to talk to some amazing podcasters about their shows while doing interviews for the Friendly Podcast Guide. And along the way, I've learned so many tips and tricks on how to start a podcast from the hosts I've interviewed and from personal experience. I've talked to those hosts about what made their launch successful and what made it more difficult. And I for sure know what I would do differently if I could go back and launch my show again. And now I want to share my knowledge with you. I'm offering free podcast consults, and I have a couple of spots open in the next month. If you need help nailing down your podcast idea, figuring out your niche, or have any other podcast questions, I would love to work with you to make your show's launch the best it can be. If you're interested in working with me, fill out the intake form in the show notes. I can't wait to answer all of your podcast questions. This next recommendation is an episode from the kid science podcast, Tumble. Tumble is a podcast about science that is aimed at helping kids ages 6 to 12 learn about the amazing world around them. But I can promise you that the whole family will be super interested in these episodes. The hosts talk to real scientists to learn about all kinds of fascinating things that happen in our world. I actually did an entire episode about Tumble, so if you want to learn even more about this fabulous podcast, you can listen to that episode. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. The Tumble Halloween episode that will help make this spooky season fun is called We Ain't Afraid of No Ghosts. The hosts talk to a scientist who isn't looking to find out if ghosts are real or not, because that can't be proven, but instead to find out why people seem so convinced that ghosts are real. The episode has special Halloween music and gets you in the Halloween spirit without being scary in under 15 minutes. The last Halloween Kid podcast for today is called Unspookable. It's a podcast for kids around 8 years old and older who are curious about scary stories, urban legends, monsters, and more. Some of the subjects include witches, aliens, and the Bermuda Triangle. The spooky stories are told alongside historical and scientific facts, so the scariness isn't too high. One of the funnest parts of the show is that you get to hear from kids sharing their thoughts on the subject that the episode is all about. Each episode is about 20 to 30 minutes long. A great episode to listen to for this Halloween season is called The Boogeyman. This episode dives into all things related to the boogeyman and why we seem to always be scared to look under our bed at night. Y'all know I love kid podcasts, so finding Halloween-themed kid podcasts was so much fun for me. I hope you found one that is going to add some fun spookiness to your Halloween season. Also, just a reminder, if you're wanting to launch a podcast but don't know where to start, fill out the form in the show notes so we can hop on a free consult call and I can answer all of your podcast questions. Talk to you soon.